why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and kind of lay out what Atom and Eternity is?
Robert Deshaies II, creator, Adam and Eternity, and the owner and editor of Rogue Comics. So basically, it's our little independent publisher that's like meant to bring up the voices of young creators. And our first series is Adam and Eternity. Basically, what we wanted to do was with Adam and Eternity was create this story about ideas and mythology. And the simple premise is a young impossible creation is like thrust into a post-apocalyptic world, and he's given nothing, absolutely nothing to deal with, and he must discover who he is and how he came to be. And once he discovers that, then he must decide the fate of the universe he was born into.
That is phenomenal. And can you explain what I'm looking at? You sent me volume one, right? So this is
Yeah.
149 pages. I was surprised to see
Mhm.
this much volume. You know, I thought it was going to be like a little 32-page book or something. So,
Mhm.
what is volume one, and how did we get to this point already?
Yeah, so volume one began last April is when it like officially began. The story was being plotted out between February and March, and then on that time we already had our amazing artist Dominic Pinto. He and I had been working on it. It was like a solid 32-page black and white book at that time. We were planning on releasing just a couple issues. And the story kind of fleshed out more, and we wanted to tell like a bigger story, and that's when like the idea of Rogue Comics came to be. So we brought a colorist on board. We brought Jake Gustafson, who is phenomenal. As you can see, the colors are like crazy, eye popping. It captures everyone. It really carries a lot of the book and its mythology. And so the story really blew up after issue one. Uh, and I had this whole idea of doing a full volume in my head. Originally, it was going to be 5 issues, but due to me leaving, going to Paris, and like the time we finished it all, we just oversized the final issue for mass release. So on our website now, you can buy all 4 issues for the first volume one. And the first volume one is pretty much to just set up the world of what Adam and Eternity is. I have a few volumes plotted out for more, but those are for years down the line because we got some more stories to tell.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I love it. The very first page is basically a single page splash. It says, "Who am I?" And
Hmm.
the way that the artwork in this flows, it reminds me a lot of manga,
Yeah,
and
it
kind of the
does.
way that they like interpret God, and it's like this being that's just in the middle of nothingness, and so that's kind of where this starts, and that's admittedly something that I find infinitely interesting. Like I love Full Metal Alchemist, and a
Yep.
big
Hmm.
part of that is like that the God being, you know, his father there, like. So this book immediately tapped into something that has me really interested and intrigued. So I guess you know, what are some of the influences and where's a lot of this coming from? Because you know, it seems like there's a lot to pull from.
Yeah, so there definitely was a lot to pull from. In terms of my influence, I've been a comic fan my whole life. I mean, I think like 6 years old, 6, 7 years old, I remember walking into my first comic shop and picking up, just the Batman, the Supermans, just the normal. And as I started to grow up, I discovered independent comics. And what's really cool is my comic shop owner, Kenny, like really threw me into independent comics. He was like, you got to check Vertigo out, you got to check Image out, you got to check out the stuff that is, expanding and branching into things that could be more. And so, I started off with like Sandman by Neil Gaiman, obviously crazy big ideas on that. Then like Lucifer and a lot of like the old Vertigo series. And I started getting into Image. And then I started getting into a bit of manga. And what I really liked was always that traditional Japanese look because, it has so much emotion, especially when the eyes. And it has like very concise, short storytelling that really focuses on the emotion of characters. And that's what's always gotten me. Every time I watch a film, what captures you is how people react to the faces. And then the other thing that's always captured me is mythology. And I'm a big fan of history. So, Greek and Roman mythology have always been a huge part of me. And wanting to learn about other mythologies, such as Buddhist, Hindu, Tao from Japan, Voodoo, Native American, anyways, all that. So it was kind of a combination of things that I've always loved, things that I've done. And then when I had paired up with Dom, his favorite book, he's told me multiple times, is Berserker. And so obviously big Berserker influence as well, but, just less action. but more philosophy and more just beautiful art to center that. So those are kind of some of the influences that really came to create Adam.
Yeah, I really love that. That's awesome. I mean, a lot of the same, man. Like I'm non-religious, but I also have like this
Mm-hmm.
fascination with religions and like a lot of the religious concepts, you know. And so
Yeah.
I think that's what really gets me about like a lot of the manga concepts with gods and stuff, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, Neon Genesis, Evangelion, like they
Yep.
get into
Yep.
like the metaphysical
Mm-hmm.
and what's the difference between a being and a human and a god, and so, like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of, I guess, like exploration of philosophy is infinitely interesting, you know. So I thought that was a really cool you know, way to take this story, and then on top of that you found an artist that really can execute that real simplistic style. I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like it just kind of represents this rawness of like we're going to explore these emotions and these feelings like as close to the core as possible, you know. And it almost leaves the artwork and the characters like vulnerable, but it makes for
Mm-hmm.
great storytelling. So I'm really impressed
Well,
with how you
thank
all
you.
came together on that, you know. And even the colors, like you were saying, like it just starts out with all these bright colors
Mm-hmm.
that just really catch your attention and focus you, you know.
Yeah, I remember kind of, but those first 5 pages, I remember like those were so big for us because we're like, this is what's gonna hook you to the book if you don't see it. And I was like, well, let's do silent pages because let's really focus on that silent storytelling. And I was like, you have this impossible thing that nobody really. It's like Adam's supposed to be unknown until like the very end of the story. Like you don't know where he comes from, you don't know who he is. He gets answers along the way, blah blah blah. Uh, and like that pale white skin always fascinates me. Like writers like Jonathan Hickman have always personified like ideally create like creatures and characters like that, and I've always loved that because it's like white can be anything. I like translucent white,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I really liked. And then those silent 5 pages, I was like, well, he's born from this dimension, and he's to tear into our own. And you're like, is he a god? Is he like a creature? Is he like a hero? Is he like a messiah? And I myself am not religious. I'm a spiritual man rather than religious man. So that was definitely a lot of themes that we were also playing with too, and like the inner conflict of like, well, people are telling me I'm a savior, but am I really a savior?
Yeah, I love that because you know, I recently talked to Brian Hawkins and Patrick Foreman. They have a book called Black
Mhm.
Cotton, and
Okay.
and
Oh
their
yeah,
book.
I've heard of
Yep.
Black Cotton. It just came out
Okay.
by
Yeah.
Scout last week. Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And so in their world, like everything's flipped, right? But it's
Mhm.
not just like the races are flipped. There's lot of history and culture that's been changed throughout things too, to kind of like build this new structure in the world. And it kind of strips away race, but makes us still have to question like what we believe, you know. And that's kind of what this reminds me of is like if whenever the way that they're writing it, like they're not telling you what is good and what is bad. They're letting you see these scenarios play out and make your own decisions about it, you know, and kind of recognize your own beliefs and prejudice.
Mhm.
And then so when you introduce this character Adam, and we don't really know if he's a human or a god or what, we get to judge by his actions and the things he says and define him for ourselves as the reader, you know. And it really plays into that internal exploration and the idea of spirituality that kind of, you know, ruminates in this whole story. And it just gives you that level of introspection that you kind of look for. You know, what is humanity? Is he a human? Is he a god? It's up to
Mhm.
the person to find that in the story, you know.
I love that because I remember, as a writer, that's what we want to do. We want to, prompt those questions within our readers to be, am I, what am I reading this and like, am I getting the story? And in parts, I wanted it to be, you picked it up, and if you didn't know what it was, you had no idea. You just picked it up off the shelf, and you're like, this is cool cover. Flip it through. It's like, oh, these pages are like really pretty, and then you read it, and it's something that you didn't expect, but everybody each got something different from it. I remember like when I would do book signings back home, I had a few actually, and that really helped promote the book because small publisher, all that. And everybody would come up to me after reading issue 1 or issue 2, and they'd be like, well, I got this from the book. And I'd be like, yes, this is like, I put a few all these messages and little callbacks to like fantastic art, like and like issue 2 they go to the Louvre, and I'm a huge fan of just traditional art, and there's so much story about is art beautiful because it's art, or is art beautiful because of its creator? And then, the perfect example of that was to introduce Lucifer, the devil, because it's like that whole story alone is up to interpretation. And then, in the first issue, when they meet Prometheus and Dolos, Titans of old, you have like that traditional earthly myth of like who we are and how we came to be. Like there was fire, then there was life, and then there's death. And so a lot of the ideas I wanted to like simply introduce in a broad spectrum, but also in that tight emotional spectrum through this one being, trying to figure out who we are. Because isn't that the answer to life? Like, what is my purpose here? What am I supposed to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what we're all looking for, is an answer to like, why we exist, not in the greater sense, but just
Mm-hmm.
like, what prompts life, what makes us continue on,
Mm-hmm.
it's something that I think kind of comes through in the current like mental health environment that we're in, where
Yes,
everybody's starting
yeah,
to realize
100%.
these things. Yeah, and you want to find out like what makes you tick, why do this every day,
Mm-hmm.
knowing. I think more than ever that concept of like an immortal being wanting to die kind of resonates more than ever. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
we're on this forefront of like pharma technology, where medicine and medical technology is going to be able to make us live for 200-300 years. Do we want that
It's
curse though?
scary. It's scary. That's what it
Yes.
is. Mhm. So Ryan, do you rate yourself?
Not really. I mean, I
No, you
dabble, but
like.
yeah, I
Mhm,
wouldn't say I
mhm.
really put true effort to it yet.
So I remember about halfway through, we're about halfway through issue 3, and like I call myself a writer. I have 3 published books, and then my comic company. But I remember I got into that mental struggle myself about halfway through issue 3, and I was sitting on the script to issue 4, and I had the ending in my head. I knew how I was like, I knew what it's going to be, but it's the words that really matter to really get it out. And I'm like, how can I speak to people and get the message I always wanted to get across, but also put parts of myself in it and put parts of like others who have helped me along this journey? Because I was really doubting. I'm like, can I finish this story? Like, this is such a big story, even it's our first story. Can I finish this? And I was like, there's that answer. This is what Adam's going through. This is what Ophelia is helping him trying to guide. This is about the characters in the world trying to tell them the story on how to get through. So I remember I was sitting with this issue 4 script open. Um, and then I was just thinking about those little things, like, how can I get through this to go to the next day? Like, what makes me different or necessarily the same as somebody else? And it really became about the story of trying to find out who you are, but it's not always about looking inside as well. It's always about looking to some of the people next to you, helping you find out who you are. And that's really what the story was all along, that kind of revealed itself until the last page. And I was like, oh, wow, it was right there all along. And it kind of just helped unfold out. So that was really cool for me as a writer to get to share that with somebody and share that with like an audience who has thus picked up the book. And I've had a few people, few fans have stuck along the way, and other reviewers, they've like came back to me after finishing the story, and they're like, "Wow, that really hit home. That really touched me because this helped me be like, oh, I can be who I want to be, even when all this is going on."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's an amazing perspective, because we as readers, that is what we're doing, is watching kind of a reflection. How do characters react to each other and the things in their world? And so we get to see that humanity explored and playing out. But as a writer, it's got to be a very like personal and emotional journey to even write a
Hmm.
story to get through something, because you have to explore yourself to find those answers. Those
Yeah.
characters are going to react in the way that you would react, but you're trying to find a way to present that's more universal and provides more perspective. And so that's how you reach more people. They always talk about like in art, the more generic the face looks, then the
Hmm.
more you can associate it to something. And they say like the smiley face logo or whatever, like that's the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
relatable because it's the most simple,
Hmm.
and that's kind of what we're doing, is taking our personal experiences and trying to break down what is the feeling behind it, and how do I turn that into something universal, make it vanilla enough that anybody can connect with it.
Yeah, it was that was a bit of a hard part too, because when we were launching our first issue in August, I was like, I'm like putting this out in the world, right? And you're like, well, how do I promote this book? And people would ask what it is, and the simple like little log line I'd give you, like, it's the Sandman meets the Catcher in the Rye. And like that did the book pretty well, actually, because
I can
in
imagine.
the Sandman, the first issue is Dream, who's like captured in this bulb for over 100 years, and it's like, well, he's so crazy powerful. How did this happen? And that was a really big influence on me, because I'm like, all right, well, we have this crazy impossible creation, Adam, who, I don't want to spoil it for the crowd, for people, because the ending is so big, but you just have him in like this embryo at the beginning of the story, and then he just wakes up and he like asks that simple question, who am I? And he just starts tearing through that dimensionality, and then he like walks into a world that he doesn't know what is. And I'm like, but isn't that us all, coming out of our mother's wombs, just silent, very visceral, and we don't know what's going on, but then there's always someone to hold us. So how could I have made our birth different with Adam? And that was, there was no one there to hold him and give him that. He had to find out, who that is and how he came to be by himself. And the most important part to me was always bringing in that one character to help him, because like along the hero's journey, you always have like the one mentor. Mm-hmm. Well, I wanted to create a mentor that could be also like a love relationship, but also somebody who was there and who had experienced the previous life, because it's in the apocalypse, like the world's on the brink, like how did all this happen? And I love doing Ophelia the most. Like, Ophelia is one of the hardest characters to write, because she had to know parts of the world of the past, but she also had to help guide Adam to a future. So she was kind of that real anchor to the story to get Adam to like where he wanted to be. And that was in part to me, as the writer, was Adam, and then my crowd was Ophelia. And that's really what I was thinking the whole time writing as well. And that's what I really like doing, to put myself into, your footsteps, putting yourself in your boots. And as you're reading the book, you're like, oh, wow, like, she has really great rebuttals to a lot of the arguments, and like little simple perspectives, because Adam can get lost in his words, get lost in his head, as we all do. And he starts rambling on, even though it all makes sense. But is it too much sometimes? And Ophelia draws him back and puts him in, settles him down. This is the story. And I'm like, and that's what I really like doing as well, playing with that dynamic.
Yeah, having a good grounding character always, it makes it that much easier to go a little more outlandish and stretch that sense of reality a little bit more, because you have such a strong character to ground them back down. So that's always a good dynamic to play with. Are you reading Origins from Boom Studios?
Oh, okay. Because I work at a comic shop back home, and I remember when Origins came out, and I had such a big pull list at the time. I had like 64 titles, and so I was like, I missed it, and I've been wanting to read it because so many people have been saying so many good things. Yeah, and I definitely will pick it up when it's in a trade paperback.
Yeah. The first issue of it is probably the least interesting in my opinion. But after that, like, it gets into a lot of what you're talking about. Like, it's basically a world where like this man created nanobots, but the nanobots took over the earth and strangled out like every bit of life until it was just nanobots, right? And so the nanobots, desperate to figure out what to do next, like they've met the end of their programming, like they fulfilled every function. What do we do next? They've recreated the scientists that made them. And so now he just appears again, basically, in this world of nanobots, and he's having to put back together memories and understand like why all of this has happened, And it's a crazy journey. Like, it's so good. They just like explore like what it is to be born from your own creation. It's like this weird like twist on an Oedipus complex. It's a really cool book. I like it a lot.
Dude, I'm definitely gonna have to check that out now, because I always love the stories that, because if you have a knockout first issue, and you give away your biggest, plot twist at the beginning, well, what's there left to be at the end? You have like your simple premise. That's always when I design my stories, I always like to give as enough information to where you're not like foreign to the world, but you have a good amount of questions. And that's why I
Mhm.
like the mystery aspect. And that's what I want to do with Adam as well. Because you're not given answers right away in any situation. Like in anything you do in life, you have to figure out what it is. And those stories that I love when writers really just sit back and are like, all right, we're going to keep teasing you until the absolute end. I really, really enjoy that aspect. So like that storyline what you're just telling me, that would have me hooked for Origins, and now I'm excited to pick that up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's right there in that same realm as you're talking about with this and
Mhm,
like Sandman and stuff. Like, kind of one of those explore human nature kind of books, and
mhm.
it's really cool. I really like it, and I think you should check that out. It will definitely be down your alley.
I definitely will. Are you reading anything else that is like really capturing your mind right now? I mean, are you a big two guy or are you more like an independent guy?
Mostly indies. I don't
Yeah.
read too much of the big two unless there's something spectacular happening.
Hmm.
I'm really into Thor right now. Donny Cates Thor. He's on this
Yeah,
like Donald
Donnie's.
Blake storyline, and oh, it's good.
It is. Yeah, I'm ready. I actually have I think it's right. I got a pile of comics. Look at this. This is pretty fun. Even though I'm abroad, I got a little pile
Yeah.
for the next to my bed, and I was like, "Here's the is it, oh Declan Shalvey's Flatline Immortal Hulk is really good." No,
Oh
but
yeah, I heard that one was good too.
this issue was so good. I
Oh
loved it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
Thor's one of those characters that is. He's a god himself. He's timeless. And I remember reading J. Michael Straczynski's run, and that really gave me like the Thor I've been looking for in comics. And now I love what Donnie's doing because Donnie's just such a phenomenal writer as well. He brings out the emotion in the characters, he brings out the emotion of the reader. I mean, you read God Country?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
big
And so
fan.
you know how big that was. And I really like
Hmm.
what he's doing with Thor. I think it's probably that and Silver Surfer Black have been my two favorite he's done. Even though he's known for Venom, I definitely think Thor and Silver Surfer are what he's really going to be known for in the future.
Yeah, I haven't read any of
Mhm.
Venom. I want to read Silver Surfer Black, but I missed that one. And then Thor has just really impressed me. I like how he has like Thor is a king, and he's
Mhm.
kind of like trying to understand what that means and kind of losing his sense of like Thorship, like Thor could go out
Mhm.
and play, but the king has to be here. So he's struggling with that, and then he's got all the stuff with Galactus and the powers cosmic and all that going
Mhm.
on. And then you also have like he's kind of losing his power or something,
Yeah.
like that's always in the
He's
back of
losing
his
the
head.
worthiness to what makes him
Yeah.
Thor. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so to me, that's what's really made him an interesting character to study right now. And then to see how powerful he was, and then he got tricked by Donald Blake, I think is just a genius play to show. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, Thor just like stopped the Black Winter like it was nothing. How powerful do you have to
Mhm.
be?
Mhm.
And then to have him just get tricked and stuck in another realm. To me, it's kind of saying like, look how powerful he is, but he's still not playing chess. He's playing checkers. And
Mhm.
now to get
Yeah.
out of all of this, he's going to have to learn to be a smarter fighter too. So I think it's a really
Yeah.
cool version of Thor.
So I remember when I was doing this with Adam, because I had a bunch of people always telling me like, "Dude, he's so powerful. Is there gonna be like any cool action scenes?" And I was like, and I would like look at them, and I'd be like, I'm so sorry, there won't be any crazy action scenes. Because I mean, you can't always solve everything with a fist, and like that was a big point of the book. Even though like we always loved like I remember that scene of like Thor going up against like the Black Winter, and I was like, hell yeah, like he's finally getting like beat down. He like calls down the thunder and like the power cosmic. That was so cool. And like what I wanted to do with I remember in issue 4, chapter 4 of Adam, when he's up against the last pantheon, and you have like because the idea of gods is if humanity exists, then we're there to believe in them. But when they're gone, all that power goes away. So when they have this being who like walks the desert and finds this last city of like all the gods, they're like, "Oh my god, this man is like the power source. This is the Energizer Bunny to turn us back on." And then I love giving that argument to where there was a little bit of fighting, but it was out of fear. rather than like action, and a little bit of fighting to like have our main character be like, well, where does power come from? Is it within yourself? Is it within the people who bound you? Or is it in like the question that guides you throughout your life? And I love that too, like because Donnie's doing it in such a good way with Thor, and like how other writers, and including myself, were able to spin that same take for different stories. It's such a cool thing because you can have that 12 basic archetypes, any archetype of story, and then everybody just gets to mix and mash and to figure out your own story. And that's what I really like. Just about the whole writing community. I mean, I always just love talking with writers and fans and what you're into and what they're into, because that helps us be like, oh wow, like that actually could be a story in like that different way.
Yeah, yeah. I listen to like a lot of podcasts, and some of my favorite are like Stuff You Should Know, or like some This American Life and stuff like that, because they give you like so many little nuggets of information, and you can just like snatch any one of those and kind of run with it as like a whole story. Like if you take any one of these little things, they're talking about what it would be like to be farming in America in the next 25 years, and how automation's going to take that. And you're like, oh, I can create a whole story about automation destroying farmland and stuff. So I think it's a really great way to like get inspired, is to like, talk to people and listen to other stories, and you can see those stories. And like you said, you mix and match all these elements to create these like 12 different archetypes. And you can explore a lot of the same things, but in so many different ways, and keep it fresh and interesting,
Yeah, and if I really were to boil down Adam into a story, it was a story just about ideas. Like, if we were really gone, if humanity was gone and we had left just this world, like, it was a like old History Channel show. What was the name? I think it was just like when we're gone or something.
Yeah, and
And
they
it
would just
showed
like
like
show like CGI
over the
shots of like
over the
overgrowth. Yeah,
years.
okay, I know what you.
Yeah, so it was like very much so like that, except I just threw mythology in that. And then I was like, all right, so what happens? Like, who's left? I'm like, you have heaven, you have hells, you have like these worlds in between, you got some gods in this corner, you got like these embodiments of life and like ideas. But then like, who's left to pick it up? Because I mean, can that live without us? And like, that was just really what it was. It was like, what creation could I create that no one expected coming, that could restart life, restart all forms of things? Because that was the big mystery, and I guess that would be the big mystery. But if the world we were experiencing, what happened if it like a year from now the apocalypse began, but like it was so sudden we didn't see it coming. And like this, I did that in the story because I mean, theoretically, would we see it coming, or would it just happen? And like that's like that really scary answer that like, oh my god. And like when I was writing those final chapters of like explaining how the world came to be in our story, I'm like, what if it just like like lightning cracked and then like blood started raining? And how would that feel in those final moments? Like, would you feel terror, or would you just be uncertain of what was going to happen next? And then what if it's just over? And that's why it's like, that little bit of hope of in Adam is you're thrust into this world and you have this creature, and then you have like this story of like how the world possibly came to be until he finds out how it actually ended. Yeah, that's where I was like, that's really the story right there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Are you a fan of Dr. Stone?
I have not read Dr. Stone, and I do not believe I know what that is. What is it?
Well, it's a manga, and it's also an anime. I think they just dropped season 2 of the anime. And it's basically like these characters. One of them's just like a super smart kid, he's like a scientist. I shouldn't say kid, like how the high school setup is in an anime, they're like teenagers,
Peter
but they act
Parker.
like adults. Yeah. Okay, anyway, so he basically one day like this green light just hits everybody and they turn into stone. And then 3,700 years later, they start to basically hatch out of these stone shells they've been in. And so it's kind of like we were talking about with the History Channel thing, where like it's all overgrown and stuff. And this one kid though, like he's real smart with science, so he starts trying to basically rebuild technology and science and stuff. And it's actually called Dr. Stone because he makes soap. Like that's his first science experiment thing, I
Oh,
guess.
okay.
And he makes soap, and he calls it the Dr. Stone because it you know it'll kill all the bacteria and keep them healthy and stuff, so they
Healthy,
can
yeah.
hunt and live and continue to try to rebuild. And along the way, there's like plenty of stuff that happens, but it keeps coming back to these fundamental questions. Like at one point, they have an enemy, and this enemy is going to kill them. Like he's like an Olympic athlete and stuff that was from their time. So like,
Yeah. Oh, damn. Okay.
but they're
That's
like the
cool.
nerdy scientist kids. And so it is like two of them, right? And so
Mhm,
they know if they get into a physical conflict with them, they're done. So
mhm.
then the main character Senku, he's like, well, I could make gunpowder. Like I have everything we need to invent gunpowder. But once we invent gunpowder, we've invented war.
Yep.
And it
Yep.
becomes this back and forth of like, I could make a gun so that we can beat this guy and not get killed by him. But the repercussion is all of humanity now has access to explosives and gunpowder. So
Mhm.
can I ethically create this knowing what the potential outcome might be? And they keep like there's just so many scenarios like that where if I invent this, like I know what society does with it eventually. So do I want this in the world again and things like that.
Mhm.
And it's a really good series if you like that kind of thing because they're just
Yeah, it
exploring
sounds actually.
humanity and
I
like
might put that
society
on
at
my
a very
list.
base level.
It's like a theory of the A bomb too. When we first created the A bomb, we didn't know what we were doing. We decided just to smash a bunch of atoms together and hope we'd win a war. And just that theory alone, like at that moment when who knows about how many other universes that did it before and parallel craziness. But like, in this universe, when we start splitting atoms, I mean, you're playing with God power that like breaks existence. So it's like I love that because like even if you introduce the smallest thing, and like that's what I love telling about Prometheus in that first chapter too, because he's like, well, I gave fire to life because that's always been Prometheus. He gave fire to the humans, to live, to hunt, to be better than his siblings. Um, but what happens when you give that fire and you turn it into war and you turn it into death rather than using it to dance or create art? And then that's a simple like callback to 2001: A Space Odyssey, with like Kubrick beginning, like the monkeys found out that like, oh, they had bone, and like the bone can be used as a weapon instead of
Mm-hmm.
like something to eat from. And it's just like I love those simple ideas of like what happens when you introduce A to the equation and then you have plus B and now it equals C. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Crazy.
mean, fire is a game changer in the history of
Mhm.
everything. So
Yeah. Mhm.
it's that's a vital aspect there. Somebody had to give it to us, right? So
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah,
that's really cool though. I really like the way that you built the lore and the world. Is
well,
there
thank
like
you.
a specific pantheon of gods that this comes from?
Um, it was definitely a mix. I mean, at first, with my love for Greek and Roman mythology, I definitely want to introduce the world for that. And then you have some Judeo-Christian myth, obviously, with like the tree of with callbacks to the Old and New Testaments. With talks of Messiah, devils, the Eden aspect of like who were the first creations. And then just more spiritual aspect really came into as well with the embodiments of certain ideas such as like the writer, the artist, hope, somber, existence and the journey, and then later life and death. Because I mean, there's so many crosses of mythology that we see the same character over and over again. And that was really one of the big things I wanted to do, was create my own mythology that felt unique enough but also familiar to people as well. So that's why I definitely balance the stuff that at the beginning, and then this is my stuff at the end that you hadn't known about. So it's definitely a mix because we all come from the same story, but it's all about creating this little bit of different stories to make your little bit own. So it's definitely a mix of many mythologies. I mean, in later volumes that I have planned, like we're going to be exploring a lot of South American and Native American culture, because that's so raw and visceral with like
Hmm.
traditional primal history that is also crazy relevant. Like if you ever read Grant Morrison's 18 Days, that's pretty much just Native American mythology retold, and that's really great and interesting stuff because
Yeah.
I mean that was the world before North America. So a lot of great things you can pull from, but I really wanted at first to pull from relevant and like known mythology, and then create my own was definitely like for the first story.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that I mean that's why I asked because you never know. I was reading Future State Wonder Woman, and
Mhm.
they introduced Yara Flor, and she's Brazilian, and so they're
Yeah.
introducing like the Brazilian mythology and stuff.
Mhm.
And as I'm reading the book, it was like that. Like it felt familiar. I could identify different elements of it from like other mythologies that I do know a little bit about. But at
Mhm.
the same time, I was like, this is new and kind of different, and a remix of what I already know. And so it's really interesting because all of that stuff, if I didn't know that Yara Flor was Brazilian before I read it, it was just like, what is this? Like it's familiar, but it feels like kind of made up, But to know that she's Brazilian and that that's where they were pulling from, I think it's really interesting to see so many hotspots all over the world where ancient philosophy and religion kind of
Mhm.
mimicked each other, even from opposite sides of the planet.
Yeah, I really like, especially with DC, how they've handled. I mean, Wonder Woman's one of my favorite characters because I mean, she's the paradox. She's the perfect middle between Superman and Batman. She's the loving warrior, um, which is crazy cool when you think about the archetypes. Like Superman is the embodiment of hope; he's everything we could be. Batman's the embodiment of justice, and justice is served in the most like justiful way, without
Yeah.
being pure vengeance. And that's why Wonder Woman's so great because she's that perfect middle. Like she'll cross the line if she needs to, but she'll also love somebody to like get the point where she wouldn't need to. And what I like about the Amazons is, how we have the Greek and Roman, the Greco-Roman Amazons, and now we've introduced the South American Amazons. So the Aztec, the Incans, the Mayans, and then also you have like the Bana Migdal, from where Artemis is from, which are like Egyptian Amazons. And I love that because then you have three different cultures all blending, but it's still the same mission of all the sisters. So I like how DC's handling that a lot. And I think the Yara Flor is going to be a huge character, because she's going to add just to that Wonder Woman myth of, you can be a woman of any color and be like an amazing power, like amazingly
Hmm.
powerful. Because I mean, I have really powerful women in my life who've helped me to become who I want to be. And that was also, take that on as Adam. Like, was Ophelia the strong woman that, a girl could pick up and read? Because that's an audience we always want to vie for as writers is, can I speak to both men and women? Because, men is generally have traditional for comics. But, when you can hand, like, one of your female friends or any girl, like, a comic book, and they're like, whoa! You're like, yes, like, you did that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I thought it was great because she did kind of stand on her own. She reminds me of these characters like from Hercules, the Disney
Hmm.
cartoon.
Hmm.
She was very strong and independent. You just had the Witcher series that had a very strong, like,
Yeah.
independent kind of co-lead situation, and so I think that is the future. I have a 3-year-old daughter, and
Oh, well.
that's one.
Congratulations.
Oh, well, thank you. That's one thing that like really struck me as like I really liked Yara Flor reading her because
Hmm.
she is like kind of young still, but she very much embodies like this generation. She reminds me of like Miles Morales in the sense that
Yeah.
like she as a character kind of embodies a lot of what that age group and that generation's going through. And I could see her having a huge future. I think if you're looking at like, oh, right now, like she's gonna take a little while to get the traction, but I fell in love with her immediately, and I know a lot of people really like her. So there's a lot of optimism with the fan base that she is going to become something pretty solid. I really liked
Yeah,
her
and
in the
Miles too.
yeah, Miles is really blown
I
up.
mean, Miles, I mean, because my brother is a huge fan of Spider-Man and Peter Parker. Like, I was a Batman kid, he was a Spider-Man kid. And so when I remember Spider-Verse came out, that was like more of his, he knew who Miles was from like the comics, but you know, when he watched that film, he's like, oh wow, like that's Spider-Man. And like I love how so many kids now are growing up with that being their Spider-Man. And like that's what I really DC when introduced with Future State was, oh, here's possible futures of other, you know, heroes picking other characters picking up the mantles. And I really like that. I mean, like I always, because I mean, Batman has to retire at some time. So who's the perfect bat to take over? I mean, it could be any of the Robins, but I like how they introduced, you know, somebody from the left corner rather than the right corner. And then the Superman with the House of L, like that's super cool because it's like, wow,
Yeah.
he finally created the family that he never had. And it's like I like what they're doing a lot, and I've heard great things. I've yet to read any of the Future State because I've been waiting for all the trades because the comics are so expensive nowadays. You have to like pick so
Yeah.
many. It's like, oh, it's crazy. But I'm excited to dive into all that.
I really like the I've read most of Future State.
Okay, rad.
And I went into it like I'm typically a pretty pessimistic person, unfortunately. And I was already pretty upset with DC because Williamson left Flash and
Oh,
the
I was,
creative
yeah.
team.
The last couple months have been a beat
Oh my
down
god!
for us
Like,
DC fans.
like man, I read like the 3 issues after Williamson, and at the end of that third issue, like it just got worse and worse and worse. By the
Yeah,
end of the third issue,
yeah.
the artist wasn't even drawing like borders on the panels anymore. Like everything was just running together. I was like, if they don't care, why should I? You know? So
Yeah, I mean, death metal was one of the. I hate to say it, but it was not an event. That was not how you do a story. But
yeah,
that's
I didn't read any of
that,
that one, but people really seemed to be liking it, enjoying it, thought it was really good up through about halfway, 3/4 into it, and then they
yeah,
just felt like it
yeah,
was too much. Like the audience got fatigued on it, I think is the problem. It should have been shorter and a little bit more compact.
yeah. It is what happens with any story. If you start running too long without your ending, or what that felt like was an AT&T ad. Um, And that really is because unfortunately
Yeah.
that's what happens in the corporate world. And like that's where Marvel does so much better is they have a streamlined vision of where their company is. And DC is now we're in that weird space, but they're trying to figure out what to be again. And
Hmm.
that was the same thing with I don't know if you read I was there when the New 52 started and I was like but I had loved characters for so long because I'd been reading them pre Flashpoint, and then Flashpoint happened, and I was so angry. But I was also like a lot younger, and then I remember when like Rebirth happened, and I was like, oh, we have hope again. Like I'm getting the characters that I remember growing up, and then like Rebirth faded off. And then we were like in this lull zone for a while, and there were a few good titles. I mean, Josh Williamson's Flash was probably one of the best Flash runs to
Oh,
ever
solid
happened.
across the whole run. Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're entering this new state again, where I hope they definitely have found more of their footing and they're going back to more character and more story focused books rather than like those massive big stuff. Because that massive big stuff is fun, yeah, but like you have to write a good story with it. You can't just throw like, oh, this is cool because it's metal. Like you need some character
Yeah.
behind it to make it what it is.
Yeah, I've never really read much, if anything, of Scott Snyder's work. Oh no, actually I
Mhm.
read Undiscovered Country, but I have no beef with the
Mhm.
guy. Like I'm not complaining about him.
No, yeah,
Um,
he's one of the fantastic writers of our
yeah,
time.
I know how much people love him, and then outside of the last 5 issues of Batman, I really like Tynion as a writer. Like his work on Something Is Killing the Children and Department of Truth is bar none amazing.
Oh,
You know.
he's a better indie writer than he is superhero writer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you
Yeah.
have Joshua Williamson, which we spoke on. These are the three architects that are doing this Infinite Frontier. Like they are
Mhm.
kind of putting all these pieces together. And that gives me a lot of faith because I know how strong the storytelling talent is that's putting this universe back together. And so that's the one thing that has me really, really optimistic. I also think Future State turned out better than I thought. So that gives me hope that it was kind of a stopgap to kind of give them a chance to reset into something they know and they
Mhm.
can move with because it does feel like the whole end of last year with all the corporate stuff and everything like it just threw them off their game really bad.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone could feel it. I remember talking in the comic shop with all our customers, and it was a tragedy. I mean, like our DC sales went like, and like people, and I remember like we're like trying to hype up Future State, and I myself, who was been a DC fan my whole life, I was like, oh my god, I have more Marvel and indie than I ever have, and I have like only Black Label books from DC, because that was the only thing that was keeping me hooked. Because I was like, oh, this is actual stories that I care about, because they're very character centric. And it happens that you have the other history of the DCU, which is John Ridley writing his best at prose. Because I've just been a huge fan of his prose work. Because I read not just comics, I read a lot of books as well. And then you have like Tom King, who just can't swing wrong, because he's one of those writers too that plays the long game. He plays the 12-issue story rather than the pleasing every month. And then you have Joker, Harley, Criminal Sanity, and just a lot of other like very interesting books that are diving in stuff that necessarily the main DC wouldn't fit in. And that's what I liked about Black Label too. And it definitely appeals to the more mature audience, because now that I'm growing up from reading the superhero smash 'em ups, now I want something more. So I hope that they continue to do that. But now they've brought the DCU back together, so I'm really hopeful for the future.
Yeah, I mean, what you were saying earlier just rings so true to me on like the movie and comic level. Marvel, because of the MCU, because of the strength and the singular vision that is the MCU, Marvel Comics has a clear vision of what their universe is and what it needs to look like. They're dabbling in the more fantastical, rated R, a little bit stretchier kind of universe. Like they have more reach but
comics.
less audience.
It's comics.
Yeah.
It's comics on the screen. That's what I love. Yeah. We're finally getting it as fans.
Yeah, but you get like that more like singular vision, and that really gives a clear roadmap, and people are latched onto that. You look at DC though, like their movies, what's done the best? The weird stuff like Joker that's unconnected, Shazam, because it felt so unconnected. Aquaman felt unconnected, and those are the movies that are really, even Wonder Woman feels unconnected. That's what's working for them, and if you look at their comic sales, the Black Label stuff, it's all unconnected. It's these one-off stories. That's where DC really seems to shine on both fronts, and I wish they would just lean into that. I kind of hope that's what this whole Omniverse thing is not bringing like the R rating from the Black Label stuff, but the very concept that these are like one-off stories that don't have to be connected to a bigger picture, And I think that's where they would really find success in their regular line, is just forgetting continuity altogether.
The most interesting book that's coming out of Infinite Frontier for me is Gene Luen Yang's and Ivan Ray's Batman Superman, because it's exploring the Batman Superman of Elseworlds, and I'm like, dude, like I want to know about all these different, because like we all love Gotham by Gaslight, we all love Superman Red Sun, we all love these Elseworld stories, and now we're getting like a mainstay monthly change. And now I'm also excited for Justice League by Bendis and Marquez, because we're going to finally get the new Avengers in the DC lore.
Okay, so apparently the Chromecast can turn on my TV, and my daughter is playing on her tablet. So I was like, why did that TV turn on? And then YouTube started loading. I was like, it's about to get really loud.
Okay.
Yeah, Infinite Frontier. Yeah. I'm excited for that because you have Joshua Williamson is writing the Infinite Frontier kind of like launch book, like Infinite Frontier 0 or whatever. So that gives me faith. I really like the way he does like classic superhero storytelling, but it doesn't feel dated, And then they've also just announced he's on a Green Arrow title. I think that'll be really cool for him, because if he can play that the way he does the Flash,
Because I'm excited for Robin. I think Robin. Damian Wayne's he was my Robin growing up. So I'm super excited because he's just been trashed the last 5 years by DC. So I'm excited for him to finally get on back on track, and I
So
couldn't think of a
you're a
better
Damian
writer.
Wayne fan?
I am, yeah. Probably Damien and Dick are my two favorite Robins, but I also really like Tim. I mean, Red Robin was one of my favorite series as well by Fabian and Cheza. That was awesome. That was really good.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you like Damien from the beginning? Because I feel like the whole fan base like hated him at first, and there was like this slow migration to really coming to find him endearing.
So I loved him from the beginning, yeah. And the reason why, Grant Morrison's probably my all-time favorite writer. And I mean, just the way the way he's my favorite Batman writer, hands down. Like I have every single one of his Batman volumes because it's what it is. But I love Grant so much because Grant takes a character and he basically dilutes it down to that singular idea. That's why All-Star Superman is pretty much the only Superman story you ever need to read, because it's the definition of who Superman is. What he did with Batman was he took the man who was unbreakable. He broke him after he became too big. I love that. Like from beginning of Batman and Son, which led all the way to the end of Incorporated, it was the same Grant Morrison Batman story across multiple different series. Like that's just phenomenal what a writer can do. And what he did with Damian was he created a little Bruce Wayne who like literally was like one of the most deadly creations ever to be like a Batman from birth. And like I loved that. Like I like loved Damien, and like I remember reading 666 the first time, and I was like, yes. I was like, I want that to be my Batman in the future.
Yeah. It kind of
Yeah.
reminds me of like Dragon Ball Z, and then they went on to
Mhm.
what was the weird sequel to that, Dragon Ball GT, and they took Goku and turned him back into Kid Goku, but he's still adult Goku on the inside, you know, and that's kind of what that feels like, is trying to recapture like the childlike essence of who that character was like way down the line, but better executed because it's a different
Mhm.
character, you know, and you can change
Mhm.
the outcome. But it's just like an interesting concept to like try to kind of rebottle your childhood back in and visit that character with all the experience, but at that young age again, you know.
Yeah, it's like John Kent too. Like I'm a huge like I remember Super Sons was one of those crazy big highlights of Rebirth, and it should be like John and Damian were like the Batman and Superman, but obviously they were still sidekicks, and I loved it. And then I remember like I like Bendis as a writer and as a creator, and I was so mad though when he aged up John. And I hope that we can see John do justice, especially with Philip Kennedy taking over. I have all the faith in the world with Philip because of The Last God. I mean, if he can write an epic fantasy world like that, he's going to write an epic fantasy of Superman. So that, that gets me excited for that side of the DCU too. Yeah, I think they got their stuff back together finally, and I'm excited.
Yeah.
They just got to cut down the Batman books, even, but I know that's what keeps the company afloat. So
Oh man, I was going to mention that earlier, but yeah,
Mhm,
that's one of my problems, and one of those things that I see is like the long-term play they need to make to get back and
mhm,
good is like they need to cut down how much Batman there is, cuz you can say all day he sells absolutely, but he's killing all of your readership. It's collectors that are buying every Batman cover and 5 of them, you
mhm,
know. That's what's buying
mhm.
Batman, but it's not the readers. It's not the long term fans. It's not the people that are going to be there for the character, you know. And I
Mhm.
think if they would cut Batman out of a lot of their lineup, you would start to see over time, you would start to see that rebalance and some like really good other characters get circulated in, because
Yeah,
it's just crazy. They don't even sell anything except for Batman and a couple Superman books anymore.
yeah. And I mean, look at how diverse Marvel's line is, just in general. I mean, they don't have a single repeating book besides maybe like three Spider-Man books.
I think
Yeah,
they're only
okay,
running
Spider-Man,
2, but maybe
yeah,
3.
even
Yeah.
like two.
Hmm.
And then you have a lot of great miniseries highlighting smaller unknown characters. And like people are loving the miniseries because they're really tight, concise stories with fantastic talent. And that's also another thing DC has been kind of lacking on is the internal talent. Yeah, you have a lot of great writers, but where are those superstar artists that, you know, are out there. I mean, yeah, you got Dan Mora, you got, I mean, Pat actually left, you got Jorge Jimenez, but you have them both on Batman. Like, where are these writers that are going, where are these artists and writers that are going to like other characters that you could have? I mean, on my desktop alone, I have so many pitches for a lot of independent stuff, but I have a folder that's for DC of like stories that I would tell, and they're all obscure characters because I think they have so much better stories that we could give to the public. But would it sell in the mass, or would they be accepted by editorial? Probably not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man, if I was gonna like really make a bold statement and tell people where I stand, if I was DC, I would change Trinity. I would come out with a Trinity book that's like Yara Flor,
Oh,
Batman Beyond, and
yeah.
Jonathan Kent, and just like have somebody just like amazing write it and just put it together. And because those characters are so cool, like you look at
Mm-hmm.
Superman, like his whole deal is he started to develop these powers and he had to learn to be Superman and what that meant
Mm-hmm.
and what was a Superman. But Jonathan Kent knows he has this powers and kind of knows the path he has to go on, but he's still so young and inexperienced that he's learning how to do the job, except for he's way farther into the job than Superman was at that
Mm-hmm.
point, you know? And like, I
But
don't know,
I
it's a
love
lot of
that
inner
because,
turmoil.
yes, can he live up to his dad,
Yeah.
who is the pinnacle superhero? Like, that's the best part of John Kent. Same with Damian. Can Damian live up to be the
Mm-hmm.
Batman that his father was? And then like with Yara now that like super, because I mean we had Donna and we had Cassie, but you know they were kind of like their own Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
Now I like how Yara is like they've like defined her, at least in the future of the DC universe, as the next Wonder Woman. So that'd be interesting how we
Well,
have like a non-relative of a character to
what I
become a
love
Wonder
about
Woman.
Yara, like it's in Superman, Future State, Superman, Wonder Woman. Like
Hmm.
Yara is
Dan Waters,
flawed.
Dan Water, dude, he's one of the greatest writers right now. Love
Yeah,
him so much.
I love the way they play Yara Flor in that because she's so relatable. Like things are just like they're not bad, but they're not good either. She's feeling kind of lost in the world, and like she just goes to a bar and has a drink, and I'm like, that's human, you know. Like she's
Yeah.
just not happy, but nothing is good or bad in her life, you know.
Hmm.
Kind of like Sublime, you know, ain't nothing wrong, ain't nothing right, you know. But still, I
Yeah,
try
yeah,
to
yeah.
stay awake all night, you know. Like that's Yara. Like it's so relatable because it's just like nothing's really messed up. I don't know that I need to be a hero, but I am a hero. So what do I do? And because it's like you know not a situation of crisis, like she kind of struggles with her place in the world, and I find that relatable. So I really like her as a
Hmm.
Wonder Woman. I hope they continue to use her and kind of try to put her over, you know.
Hmm. Same thing with the Green Lanterns. You know, I love how we got a couple amazing Green Lanterns from the New 52. And I like how they've explored. I mean, I've always been a Hal Jordan guy at heart because I mean, Jeff Johns' run of Green Lantern was just so phenomenal. And I love what Grant's done with the character as well. But like, I really hope we get to see a new era of Green Lantern because that's another great side of the DCU that has been really just shunned away. Because I mean, look at the lore of Green Lantern. I mean, like Black. Remember how big Blackest Night was? I mean, like you like. Let's go back to those days. And I really hope that they shine some more. Also, really hope we get some more of like the new gods. And like they pay a little bit more respect to the past. Because I mean, look at how big Kirby was for Marvel alone. I mean, like they have an Eternals movie coming out. Like dude, like you should look at Marvel, be like, oh wait, you have Kieran Gillen and Assad Ribic on Eternals. You have the new gods. Why do you have no one writing them over here? So it's just like so many great things. I mean, I think you have a New Gods film. Are you gonna have a New Gods series? And so it's a lot of those things where I think things are
You
kind of getting back into place, and I hope they do.
you know who would do an amazing job? I guarantee would do an amazing job on
Mhm.
Green Lantern. Like if you want somebody to redefine Green Lantern again, Al Ewing. Like
Oh, oh,
his writing
100%,
on
one
Incredible
hundred
Hulk
percent.
or
Mhm.
Immortal
Immortal
Hulk,
Hulk. Yeah,
and then he's doing
yeah.
Sword, and that is just like picking up for people. We only
Hmm.
find them when they're dead is so
Yeah.
good, so good. Like that.
It's sci-fi.
Yes,
Sci-fi. Yeah,
like
yeah.
that guy gets cosmic. If you want somebody to
Mhm,
redefine Green Lantern, give Al Ewing a big enough paycheck, and I'm sure he'll show up and make
I
something
would
new. You
love
know.
if Ewing hopped over to. Oh my God, if he hopped over to DC. I mean, Marvel's he's gonna be hard to get away. Because I
Yeah.
remember reading the Ultimates Omniversal. That was like the coolest freaking team of heroes, dude. You had literally, you had Black Panther, Captain Marvel, America Chavez, Spectrum, and uh, uh, Blue Marvel. Blue
Oh,
Marvel. Yeah, I mean the coolest omniversal team, and like that was like Ewing's first big book. And then I remember reading Immortal Hulk 1, and I was like, oh my God, he just redefined the Hulk. I'm like,
yeah.
so I could tell if you gave him the Green Lantern title, that would be
Oh
amazing.
yeah. Like his ability to kind of redefine a character and mix that with his ability to write space and sci-fi and cosmic stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
Green Lantern is just right for the picking for that guy. That'd be an amazing turn.
100%. Yeah, that would be really good. Because I mean, we have that whole side of the DCU as well that is space. And we're
Hmm.
just like confined. I mean, like, yes, they've been showing the magic stuff a bit more too, because that's also like, I mean, Shadow Pact is one of like the best series by Bill Willingham back in the day. And you had like Seven Soldiers of Victory, and I'm like, those are two beautiful signs of the DCU that we can get more of. But right now,
And
we're really
Justice League
focused on
Dark.
the core. Yeah, JLD was one of the best series
That
that DC
yeah, that
had.
series has been really strong. The Future State one, written by Rom V. Holy cow, it was good.
And Rom
Um,
is he's one of those characters again that really,
yes,
really, really gets comics, and he gets character.
his
Uh,
Future State Catwoman, great. Oh my god, it was so cool the way they pulled it all off. He
I was just
wrote
reading this as I woke up. Yeah,
nice. It's got
yeah. That was.
palindrome in
Mhm,
there, and like, oh my god, the way he writes that guy, it's so he gets
mhm,
it. It's perfect.
mhm. Yeah, I mean Catwoman too. I mean, she's just she's so cool. Like I'm so happy that we have like another Brubaker, Darwin Cook era of Catwoman, because I mean Brubaker is just all time great comic writer and writer in general. And I'm
Hmm.
like, yes, we actually have another really great writer on a Catwoman title because she is as cool, if not like as cool as Wonder Woman.
Yeah, yeah. He
Yeah,
also did the Future State Swamp Thing, and
yeah, yeah.
that was very good. And then he's picking up this new Swamp Thing run starting in March
I think
this month.
this week is yeah. I think this week's the first Swamp Thing.
I don't think so, is
It
it?
might be. It
Oh
might
yeah,
be
yeah,
this
it
week or
is
next
the
week. I don't
third. Yeah,
know. One of those
I'm
two.
sorry. I was
Mhm.
just looking at the list for the 10th for next week, and I was like, no,
Oh,
it's
oh,
not there. But
that's
yeah, you're right.
I have
Number one
I
is
have
the
the week
third.
and then the next week. Yeah, yeah. I'm with the on the pull list, man. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. So I'm
Hmm.
really excited for that because, like Future State Swamp Thing, like you can tell he just gets it, and like
Hmm.
just shy of the Alan Moore run. Like those
Yeah.
two issues
Yeah.
weren't quite enough to be that good, but he gets the character in that same kind of way, you know. And so I'm
Hmm.
really excited for that. I think he's gonna do an amazing job with Swamp Thing moving forward.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's what, for me as an upcoming writer who is, just barely broken the surface, not even breakout yet. What I really wanted to do is, I look at the big two as, that guiding point because, a lot of us want to write for them at the end. That's always the dream. That's what we grew up with. We read those characters and we want to write those characters. But also with how big the indie market's growing, we have that chance to tell that story that we necessarily would have, jutted into this specific canon character, and we can tell it ourselves. So like for me, I got 5 projects I'm working on that are like ongoing right now. I got a Kickstarter coming out next month for a Japanese fantasy tale with Dominic Pinto, same artist on Adam and Eternity. And then I have probably the best superhero concept I've ever come out with that nobody's done before, that I'm pretty sure. And I'm absolutely 100% sure nobody's done before, actually, that I'm working on with a crazy good talent, David Strahan. Um, and we got that coming up. And then I have a bunch of shorts coming out to expose, to bring up other great artists. And so I wanted to delve into that mainstream stuff and then like that small stuff by telling just a really good story. So I have 3 shorts coming out in the next couple months that are just human nonfiction tales. So basically, like, how can I flex my dramatic character telling. And then I have, my great pitches that I'm going to be sending out, all over the time. But I like that for the independent stuff now has come up right alongside DC and Marvel, to where the market is so good that we can be able to tell the stories that we've always wanted to tell without them having to be our traditional books.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you used to have only one option for that, and that was basically you get picked up as a movie or a TV show. And indies
Yeah.
have just opened that market so that you can tell literally any kind of story you want,
And we've gotten some really good ones this past year. And, that was really great because also people, one of the benefits of COVID, if there was any, was people got to go to their comic shop and pick up all those back issues. And I remember we sold so many trades. And we sold so many series that people had missed out on before. I mean, Rick Remender blew up. If you've ever read Black Science, Deadly Class, Low, Seven to Eternity, I mean, those are all phenomenal fantasy sci-fi books. And I'm glad people finally got into them. People were picking up Brubaker's backlog. People were picking up Grant Morrison's backlog from stuff from like older that they wouldn't have picked up because it was old Vertigo. And those are hard to find. Just little stuff that people pick up that were like, oh my God, like these are cool ass stories that we can tell now. And I love how so many companies too are also coming up. You got Scout, Mad Cave, AWA, Boom is really hitting the precipice, Aftershock, Black Mask. I mean, so many great companies that are really telling.
Black Box.
Behemoth, yeah.
There's quite a few out there now, and
Source
I
Point.
hope they all stick around. Yeah, Source Point.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah, I for me, I'm looking like, maybe 2 years ago. Image number ones you put on your list, boom number ones you looked at. And then now I look at it today, image number ones you pull and boom number ones you pull. Aftershock number ones you look at. So I'm looking like 2 years down the road, I think Aftershock is going to be, our next boom in Image.
With their media deal they've just signed, I have no doubt that they will be shifting things in their company to be definitely TV and movie pickups. I hope that doesn't degrade the comic, because I'm a big fan of, you write a comic to be a comic, you don't write a comic to be a movie or TV, because any writer will tell you can know which one's written in that way.
Oh yeah, I'm the exact same way, and probably about a year, maybe 18 months ago now, Aftershock started putting all the same graphic design elements. If you start looking at all their books, they're very consistent in how they're laid out.
Exactly the same. Yeah.
And so since they've been doing that, it's been all quality. Because they had books before where I was like, why would you even...
Yeah. Their first couple books weren't... they had the really good writers who they brought on board originally. Garth Ennis is A Walk Through Hell. You had Brian Azzarello's American Monster. You had some really good stuff. But, now they're really focusing on the younger talent that's coming up. And I really, really like that.
Yeah, they have Undone by Blood blew me away. I'm really excited for the next...
Lonnie and Zach, I've had the fortune of talking with them, and Lonnie actually helped me work on a pitch. Incredible,
nice.
Both incredible guys.
They're
and
right.
I love westerns. Both great westerns, and they modernized a neo-noir western, and that was so damn good. And I'm excited for the new one this week.
The Other Side of Eden.
I love
I fell in love with Solomon Eaton from the beginning. That dude is such a bad guy. I'm excited to see more of his story, and then whatever they parallel that with. Ethel's story was solid, and so I'm excited to see what the pairing is for this one. Because Solomon's a bad dude. You do not want to run into him.
Yeah, man. Yeah, he's the man with no name. He's our Clint Eastwood.
Ryan Parrott's Day of the Dead, it was a really cool twist on the zombie genre, something different from what we've seen for so long, so they have a lot going on over there.
Highlight Year Zero I really enjoyed, because I'm not I wasn't the Walking Dead guy. I'm Kirkman. I've never really been he hasn't really hooked me in as a lot of other writers have, but Ben Percy really hooked me in with a zombie story like no other. I really enjoyed Year Zero quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I read the first Year Zero and actually liked it. For a zombie book, I really kind of picked it up. We'll see, it's probably just a copy. And it was interesting. It didn't keep me for the whole series, but I know a lot of
Mhm.
people really liked it, and now they're doing like a season 2 or volume 2 or
Yeah.
something like that.
And that's what I
So
like
that must
about
have been a
comics
hit.
because something is for everyone. So
Hmm.
it's perfect.
Have you read
Because even
We
with
Live?
us, yeah, I did. We Live was
We
really
Live.
good.
I just
Hmm
interviewed those guys, man. Like that book is amazing. It blew my mind like through and through.
hmm
It was such a
hmm
unique story, like style of storytelling. They always kept me on the edge. Everything was shocking, and that twist at the end, just like, whew, I can't wait for the
Yeah,
rest of that. It's going to be incredible.
I remember seeing that Dustin Win cover, and anything Dustin does, I'm like, yeah, like I'm getting this. And then it turned out to be a really good story too, and I was like, hell
Yeah.
yeah, the Mirandas killed it.
Oh yeah, yeah, it's
Mhm.
incredible. It was really interesting talking to them because I'm blown away by how much there is on the horizon for this already. Like they're
Mhm.
talking a one shot somewhere this year, and the trade will be out in May for the first season, and then season 2 is supposed to start in the summer. So we're already
Yeah.
getting like the follow up to this year, and I'm like, whoa. They're like after
Mhm.
the end, you kind of know what genre this was actually supposed to be, you know, but then they're like, but we're even going to play with that more in the next season, you know. So I'm really
Mhm.
interested to see how they repeat the success they had with this first one. It shocked me.
That's awesome. Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
the best news for us as creators. I like the seasonal format. I think definitely telling in volumes and giving time for a volume to digest helps a lot. Because I think we all get tired of ongoings. Because I mean, how flooded the market is. Like, how many do you want to keep picking this up every month? Especially if the story has a lot of lulls, like a lot of filler. Because I'm
Hmm.
not about the filler. I want the story to be tight, concise, to get the point, to get what you're trying to get across. And that's why like we're taking that break with Adam. We're letting the first one settle. We're trying to give it to people to be able to get in their hands. And they'll be like, oh, do we like this world enough to where there would be a 2? But it also gives me as a time as a writer and creator to also pair up with other artists to tell their stories I want to tell. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Bitter Root was the first book that really introduced me to it.
Okay, yeah.
And
hmm
like, I love the format. Like, you get this great 5 issue story arc, and like, you just sit with it, you know. And then they did the one shot,
hmm
and that like got those feelings moving again. And then
hmm
they come out
hmm
with season 2, and like it just hits as hard, you know. Like it really feels like they're giving you something, and they're not just putting out issues because they have to, you know. And so I'll
hmm
always sign up for 5 months of that every year. That sounds great to me, and it
Yeah.
just,
The one
you know, it
shot's
helps
always
with
a
the
great
pull
way to do
list.
that.
Hmm.
hmm hmm
It helps so
Yeah.
much with the pull list when you can kind of be like, well, now I can read more series because they're taking place at different times of the year, you know, versus like, well, if
hmm
it's ongoing, I can only pick up 5 series because it starts to cost a lot of money to pick up a bunch of issues you
Yeah.
don't even want to read.
Yeah, it really does. Like I remember right before I left, I had my first artist showcase come out for Rogue Comics. So we released this limited edition magazine format, 8.5 by 11, those DC Black Label magazine books. We did a 32-page one shot of 3 short stories I wrote with 3 different artists. And that went really great with the people who've been supporting our company really well, and then people who've been picking it up, and people who wanted to see something else than Adam. And I love doing that short storytelling as well, because if you can knock out a comic story in 20 pages or less, and have it like really drive hard, then like that's some of the best stories we'll get. I mean, why do you think there's an Eisner category for best short comic? So, that's I really like doing those short stories as well. And those one shots are always great for doing mid-season or to introduce a topic. I really, really enjoy
Hmm.
that format.
Yeah, I think it's a great format. If you look at, I mean, the Red Summer Special from Bitter Root's a great example of how much
Hmm
universe building you can do with little short stories like that.
Yeah.
And then like Milton Lawson's Detective Heller, Thompson Heller, Detective Interstellar. He was just telling me the other day that the trade, when that comes out, it's going to have 3 different backup shorts. It's going to have all
Oh,
3 issues
yeah.
of the original story, plus like 3 little backup shorts. But those are done by different creative teams. So he has some guest writers and guest artists handling those. And he's like, one of these like is the best story I've ever seen written of this character, and I created it, you know. And so
That's
like to me
cool.
that's
That's
a
awesome.
great way to like kind of bring in some extra talent and get to, you know, develop more texture within your universe, you know. And again, just like those little shorts, they build so much that people kind of overlook, you know. And I wish they would pay more attention, because that's where you get a lot of your character
Mhm.
building and those connections, you know, and building the universe. So it's definitely something that I enjoy. I wish more people would do that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I really hope with especially the way the market's flushing out and people are really starting to pay attention to comics again. I mean, just in general, just the pop culture. We're really getting something for everyone, and we're also getting the chance to tell, you know, I remember doing a few pitches that I've gotten feedback on recently, that were saying, uh, they're a little too short because they might get lost on the shelf. Like, you know, like a 64 to like 86 page original graphic novel. And really, you only see some of those from like the big creators because, you know, their name's going to be like seen on the shelf. I don't know if you got the chance to read Dracula Mother Effer
No,
this year.
familiar with it, but I haven't.
Yeah.
But you know,
So that
Brubaker
was
and Phillips, they did Pulp, and that
mhm,
was kind of a like a small
64.
novella style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really like doing that. Like I have 3 stories that are sitting on my laptop with, you know, art paired to them that have been sent out to a few different pubs that they all got back to me. And they said, oh, this is too short because partially because you're an unknown creator, and others because it's like they might get lost on the bookshelf. So now I know that I'm like, oh, you have to be a pretty big creator to sell your short story. But hopefully now that the market's coming up, we as young creators can tell that really short, concise story because we know it's a good story. I mean, like we don't need 200 pages to flash it out. We only need about 60, 70 pages. And now I really hope that with these other smaller companies coming out, we'll be able to really do that.
Yeah, I mean there's an obvious shift in the market, you know, and right now I feel like we're kind of riding high, at least here in the States, a lot of it with inflation, just from all the money that was kind of pumped into the economy last year to keep us from coming to a grinding
Hmm.
halt, you know. And so I do believe like we're already seeing attention shift to more like trades and original graphic novels, and
Hmm.
we've seen a lot of creators move to this like 80 to 120 page original graphic novel format where they're just
I
getting
know
one
that's what
great
I've moved
story
to.
out there.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know that's what I'm doing. That's
So
the next 8 projects in the year I have. Those are all they're planned.
yeah. See, I kind of imagine a scenario where toward the end of this year, we kind of see a recession start to come into our
Hmm.
economy, and that's going to force publishers to rethink how they're doing things. And I think that's what we're going to see is like, just like trade style
Hmm.
OGNs become kind of a thing, you know, just something cheap to print, and they're going to put it on the shelf, and that's what you're going to read. And like the Scout model, I could see that being becoming a big
Hmm.
deal where you like get the first one, and if you like it, you can pick up the trade and get all the rest of it. If you don't like it, then you know, one and done. But
TKO as well. TKO is a
oh
perfect
yeah,
example.
yeah,
Hmm.
like I think the big two, you know, Marvel, DC, and then of course like Image, Boom, and probably Aftershock will still be putting out plenty of floppies every week for like
Hmm.
the, you know, there's a certain group that loves the floppies, you know, but
Hmm.
I could see a lot of series and projects just moving to like one shot graphic novel formats like that.
So I can tell you in Europe, that every so I got 2 comic shops about 25 minutes from my place here in the city, and both of them, the biggest thing I see every week is they have a tiny single issue section. They pretty much get they get their orders of single issues to sell out every week, and then they're gone. But what they have is they have a massive graphic novel selection, and they always promote the graphic novels above anything else here because what French, typical European books do is they've been doing that graphic novel tradition for the past 10 years. So the small European publishers, all they do is hardbacks and trade paperback stories. They don't do single issues. And every bookstore here, that's what they have. That's what they promote. And all the French translation books, they have giant compilations of like stories, or they have like the single volume that was like a really big hit. So I like that's definitely where the market is going, at least now that like they see that other markets have. I think the US market is definitely moving to that as well.
Let me ask you, maybe you have perspective on this, because I always wonder,
Mhm.
like, how rampant is like content consumption elsewhere? Because I feel like that's a big
It's
part of what drives the American but
mhm.
like the books and stuff is like people don't, they're so afraid of getting something spoiled. You know, like I need to read it in
Yeah,
trade and
yeah.
floppy, because if I wait till trade, somebody will have already spoiled it because everybody's
Mhm.
desperate to eat it as fast as possible.
So I can tell you the content consumption. What's really cool here is pop culture is huge, and you have. I mean, everyone I've talked to, because I speak French here, and so I get to talk with a lot of people here, and a lot of people consume uh, our American like comic books and media quite frequently. I remember I was here 2 years ago, and I saw Avengers Endgame for the first time. The theater was packed, literally packed on midnight premiere, and we got to see it like I think like 16 hours beforehand. So I saw it like, and I didn't spoil anything because I'm not one of those guys. But like I saw 16 like at Endgame, and I was like so stoked. So I'm like, please, people see this because I need to talk about it. And then, but on the metro here, when I'm just traveling throughout the city, people have comic books in their hands and they're reading it, and it could be either last week's or this week's or a trade paperback. But manga is crazy, crazy big. People don't rip it off online. People actually go and buy the books here. People go and buy actual reading. Like reading is crazy, crazy big in Europe. I mean, there's small bookstores, big bookstores. So content consumption is huge here. Like, and that's why I really like, because a lot of the American market has turned to media, like television and movies, for their content, and they've really cut down on the reading, which is a sad thing for us as
Hmm.
writers. But over here is huge. People would rather pick up a book than read or write. Like at night here, I read and I write, and that's what I did at home, and that's what I really like seeing here. So from my perspective at least, the content consumption is not as high as I'd say as the US, but very close.
What is the spoiler culture like though? Like, are people as adamant about? Because I mean, here in the states, like you
Yeah.
have the problem like WandaVision, the episode comes out at like
Oh my
3
god.
a.m. Eastern time, and people are live tweeting all the spoilers. So you wake up in the morning, open Twitter, and it's like in your face everything that's
I'm
happened.
lucky because it's 9 a.m. for no 6 a.m. for me here. So I wake up on Friday morning and I watch at 9 a.m. and I beat all of that. So
Yeah.
it's nice for me because I'm like, oh thank God. But I'm like everyone back home, I feel so bad because I'm like,
Yeah.
but no, I mean spoiler culture here is non-existent. Like people revere like when we talk about stories here, we don't say what happens. We're like,
Yeah.
this was really cool. You need to read it. Like, and this is really cool. You need to go watch this film. I really like that here because it's very a lot of respective culture here. It's like very formal. Like you walk into a store, you ask, "Hey, how are you? How's your day going?" You don't just walk in and like put your head down. And so here, spoilers are huge. So you don't spoil things here, otherwise you'll probably get kicked in the balls.
That's awesome. I need to move to France then.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy. I mean, like people are already like talking about all the comics that came out that Wednesday. Like they're reading them and talking about them before people even get off work to go to the store. And it's
And
just like, why
yeah,
can't you withhold that? Like I get it. I'm the
yeah.
same way. Like I get real. Like I want to
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
we're excited. It's what it
it.
is.
Yeah, but
Especially
I
when you
cannot
read a good
stand to
story.
spoil somebody's experience.
Yeah, it's the I always wait till if I ever talk about a story, even with friends, I always ask them first. I'm like, "Have you read this yet?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "All right, well, like we're not going to talk about it then." Like I know like with Justice League coming out, the Snyder cut, I'm super
Mhm.
excited because now we're like me because I'm a Snyder fan. That's what it is. He's a great storyteller and he does really cool epic shit. Um I'm excited. Like I think HBO Max is available. Like I don't have that. I haven't had that since I've been here. I think it'll be available in like the March 8th or something. So I'm really stoked because I'll get to see that for like the first time here. And I'll be able to watch it without like really seeing any spoilers. Um but when I get, when I see that online and like Hope to Discord, I it's so like crazy as well. Like the influx of like opinions and tweets. You're like, oh my god, like, are people just gonna hate on it just because, or is it gonna be
Oh yeah,
good? I
like
don't know.
honestly, I am more interested in the Twitter backlash from the Snyder Cut dropping than I am the Snyder Cut itself. You know, like
Damn,
Twitter has
damn.
become the official dictator of like how culture is received, and it's weird.
Oh,
It's so
it's
weird.
crazy. It's crazy. Like, and that's what I'm very much so a pay it forward and positive guy. Even though, like, deep down, like I have that little monster in me that's like, it's like the pessimist side. Like, when you said that,
Yeah.
I'm like, I relate to that, because every day you think like, oh, it's not enough, I can't do it. But like, I'm like, if you pay it forward and you keep being good to yourself and you keep being good to others, like, the universe will pay back in kind. And I've noticed that a lot with like how, like, things work with my book, and me even starting off, even like my prose stuff. And so when I get on Twitter and like you look at the battlefield, it's every day. Like, you close that app and you're like, oh my god, you're like, did I just survive war? So that
Like,
is crazy.
so I've recently got on TikTok, and
Oh god, I'm not downloading that. I'm never downloading that.
TikTok is not what it seems on the surface. I will say that. Like, it takes a little time for the algorithm to get you where you need to be, but once you get there, you realize like it's a lot different from what the public sees. But I'm not trying to sell you on TikTok. My point is the TikTok community is very positive. Like, whatever you get into the community and stuff of is very positive, and Instagram is like mostly positive. And so I've gotten to this point where I almost like I turn on Twitter like with blinders because I want to get in there, see a couple of people that I actually follow because I actually want to see,
Yeah, that's exactly
reply, and then like maybe post one or two things and get out of there, because it drives me insane that the search function includes all of the worst things you've ever seen in your life.
It's like some days you go on to see like what a couple of your friends have tweeted, or to see some cool comic art and hopefully some comic news, and then half of the time it's just crap takes, and you're like, I don't want to see this. And then I like, at some point, like, you just like, at days you get really frustrated and just do like the mute and the block, but it doesn't help. It doesn't do anything. Yeah,
they still show up. Yeah, it's one of those things. Like, I'll be like trying to like tag, like share a tag or something, and I'm like, oh, I can't remember their tag, and it's almost not even worth it because I know I'm gonna have to click the search bar, and then just all the news is gonna pop up, and I'm like, I don't want to see it. Like, why does Twitter attach the news to their search function? It makes no sense to me.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, and if you look at that algorithm in terms of like promoting creators and like getting your voice out there, like, it's like, it's small accounts are big for it. Like, when we see like those like 5 or 6 likes, we're like, yeah, like we're talking to people. And then it disappears in like 2 seconds if you don't get it at the right time of day, when you like your specific audience. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm so like over Twitter. There's just no growth there anymore. Like, there's no organic growth. Nobody new is seeing your stuff. It's the same people that you've tweeted something at 25,000 times. They're not going to see it this time either. The algorithm's going to bury it. Who cares? So I'm almost done with Twitter. Like, I'm so tired. It feels like I'm not really getting any traction. But then the other side of that is like all the horrible news and stuff I might randomly see just isn't worth it. So. We'll see how much longer I stick around.
Well, happy that I get to meet you there and helping you come on the show. Thanks for having me. I forgot to say at the beginning. But like own content-based creator stuff. Like, I have a newsletter, and my newsletter is directly attached to my website. It's not one of those like Substack forums or forums. I actually have people, if you subscribe to my newsletter, and I talk about, I have a book club on my newsletter. I have short stories, and I have my actual news. Like, I put out a bi-weekly newsletter of like, what am I working on? What's going to hit soon? Like, we just announced like our next story, A Hell of Our Own, with Dom, that's going to go to Kickstarter in 2 weeks, to get the word out there, and I'm just dropping it on people like, oh, I got a Kickstarter. It's like, no, I'm trying to build it up so it'll actually be successful. So I've been learned this past year from a lot of literary help from outside forces is you want to drive people to your content. You don't want to just put content out there. And so I like link it to my website, and people, the easiest buttons you can find on my, like, you know, my link tree on all my profiles, they're all the same. Everything says the exact same thing. So people are like, oh, now I recognize this person. And, you know, go to my newsletter, you go to my books, everything you can find are the same format. Like if you type my name in the Google search bar, you will come up with Rogue, my company, and all my books. And that's the first 3 pages. And like creators do a huge time at making that work to be able to be seen, because like you said, the Twitter algorithm and most social media algorithms will get rid of that in an instant. So like that's a huge thing I can tell creators is drive it towards your name and the stuff you work on, because you'll get lost in those bad takes.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% the same, because I own my own domain. I have a Linktree-esque website that I built myself from the ground up, you know, and it links into,
and you did it. Yeah.
And it links into everything. And I can also tell you my content itself, I specifically created in a fashion that kind of drives you to a singular point. Like my ultimate goal is to have everybody on the longest form of my content, which is like the YouTube and the podcast, you know, like these conversations. It'll be the full 1, 2, 3 hours, whatever it is, you know. And so that's where I want people to land. So like everything that I put on TikTok or Twitter or Instagram, it's all actually very meticulously designed to help drive you back to this long form video, you know. And I think that's important for people to understand. Like you have to have a target. Like you want people to go somewhere, not just to see you. If they just see you, they never go anywhere, you know. At best, they'll be like, oh, I've seen his name like 25 times, you know, but they won't know what to do with that information.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I really like that. And I love this, you know, this format, because, you know, we talk about, you know, culture, pop culture, books, and then I was lucky enough to have you a chance to talk about my books. And I love it because this is, you know, this is how we connect to people, and this is how we can get the news out. And having just a conversation is great. And that's why, like, you know, we're talking about earlier, you liked podcasts. Like, I love podcasts, love listening to creator podcasts, especially because that's when you get to hear, like, who's making the content. We get to hear our voices in interviews. Like, as writers, we like to get interviewed because we like to talk about our work. Like, we are narcissistic. That's the point.
Oh, yeah.
But we also like to hear other people's opinions because that's what's going to help. We don't just close off our bubble.
Yeah, and in my experience, a lot of times hearing my own ideas out loud, it kind of gives me more perspective on it, as well as like generating more ideas to like kind of splinter off of that. So it's always nice because like writing is a very solitary activity. It's you and whatever you're writing, you know. Even if you have a writing partner, you're probably switching back and forth, you know. And so to hear some of that stuff out loud, and you know, it just like helps with the process, and especially if, you know, somebody's talking with you and you're bouncing those ideas back and forth.
Yeah, freeform is always great. You can get a lot of really great ideas. I mean, I can tell you my best ideas are when I'm buried in a corner alone. And then it isn't until I come out after, and then I start thinking about it in my head, and then I'll talk with my siblings or some of my friends. I'm like, hey, I just fleshed out this idea. Do you think this works? And like that's like the traditional writing aspect. But when we get to go on like these free forms or have like, you know, like a Zoom call with my other creators, I remember like when we were doing Adam and we were going over chapters, I would have Jake and Dom on Zoom, and we'd just keep sharing our screens. Like, oh, what can we do here with this? What can we do here with this? And like, it's those different balances of communications that, you know, we have these days. We have these tools like that we can do that are just awesome, that you can each get a different, you know, supply of ideas or creativity or functionality in our own lives.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like I often cite, my next guest needs no introduction with David Letterman. Like that program, like I love the way that it's just kind of like this long form thing. And of course it's an interview, but at the same time, Dave is just like so relatable that it breaks down really quick, and it just becomes two people like talking back and forth. And so that's kind of like, I guess like my North Star, like what I'm trying to do with these. And then I know it's very controversial, but but I like Joe Rogan's podcast
He's
because
great. No, he's really good.
thank
He's one of
you.
the best
Yeah.
interviewers out there. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't agree with everything that he believes or anything
Oh
or the
no,
people
but you
that he
don't have
brings
to.
on, but I love the format because he's literally just like this curious guy that just wants to have a conversation and pick your brain and try to figure something out from that, you know. And so that's kind of what I take from him is like I'm curious, I want to know how this works for you and try to figure out a way to apply that to myself, you know. But I love also like my next guest because it really gives me an idea of like how to make somebody comfortable and be relatable and
Mhm.
bring them in, you know.
Yeah. Have you ever listened to Howard Stern?
Yes.
Yeah,
Another,
so I
yeah,
grew
just
up,
amazing.
right? Probably the greatest interviewer of like all
Oh
time.
yeah. Oh yeah.
So when I was growing up and my dad would drive me to school, I would listen to Howard Stern with him. And like some people might have found that questionable, especially with my age, but
Yeah.
I got to really know how like interviews and like people
Hmm.
ask questions. And if you can tell if you're a good interview, because it's like how can you crack whoever you're doing open to like get them to answer your questions? And I think freeform is the best way to do that because then the conversation just comes naturally. You're not just drilling them, and that's what I really like from Howard is like he would be able, if things got stale, he'd spice it up. But if things were being, along the line, he kept it along that line. Joe, Mr. Rogan, is one of those perfect. He
Mr.
does that
Rogan.
exact same
Wow.
thing. Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah, he does one of those exact same
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, he knows when to like really take control of the interview, but he also knows how to like get out of the way. Like this person is
Hmm.
clearly on a path here. They know what they're saying. Let them speak, you know. And
Hmm.
I hate like the whole like network thing. Like that's where I agree with him a lot. Is you go on these networks and they have a 30-minute segment, and so your interview is like 10 minutes of that. And so by the time it all gets edited down, like you just
Yeah.
sound like an idiot, you know.
You have a
But
soundbite, yeah. It's soundbites are
yeah.
one of the most awful creations to have ever existed
Hmm.
in the media. Yeah.
And then you go to
Mhm.
like Joe Rogan, and it's like, can you really sit there for 2 and 3 hours talking to somebody and not just turn into a regular person and break the facade? You know, like
Yeah.
that's what I love about it is you really get down to the nitty gritty. You know, everybody comes in like prepared to answer certain questions, but they don't have an hour's worth of questions prepared. You know.
Mhm. Mhm. Definitely. Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna have to tune off soon, unfortunately, because it's about 5:35 here.
Yeah,
So,
I was about to say
uh,
it's been a good
yeah,
hour and a half. So if
it's
you're ready to
been, but
go,
it's
I
been
know
a
you're
great
getting tired.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
what I want you to tell me is like
Mhm.
where do we find you, all your tags and all that,
Yeah.
and what you have going on and what we can do for you right now.
Oh, perfect. So first of all, thank you for having me on. I've actually loved this conversation. And you can all find me at Robbie Deshaies. So it's gonna be at ROBBY_D as in David ESHAIES_. Those are both my Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook tags, so you can find me all on the same thing. If you're interested in following my comic company, it's at Rogue Comics with an X because X is cooler than CS. And then I am the author of books Adam and Eternity, Blackjack 22 Modern Poetry, Anthology, and The Streets Run Red. You can find all those books on my website, rjdeshaieswriting.com, or at roguecomics.com. Pretty much across all my medias, it's all connected, so you'll find it either way. In terms of projects coming up, I have my most recent Kickstarter that will begin launching March 18th. It is called A Hell of Our Own. It is a Japanese mythological fantasy. We're asking the question, what if Dante's Inferno met Japanese and samurai lore? So that's with the same artist that we worked on, Adam Attorney, Dominic Pinto. I got a few other projects that are coming up later in this year. A little too early to announce, but if you'd like to keep updated, you can subscribe to my newsletter on my website.
Wow, that's awesome. I was going to say earlier when you mentioned newsletter, I actually read quite a few newsletters from different
I do
creators,
too. They're
and
big. They're awesome.
I love them. Yeah, and I feel
Mhm.
like that's something people sleep on. So that's one of those things I really
Mhm.
try to promote. I feel like podcasts and newsletters are like the most intimate connection that creators have with their audience.
Really.
So
Mhm. I feel like I'm
uh,
talking with you over just type. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah, it's really impressive.
Mhm.
So I'm definitely going to tell everybody to sign up for that newsletter, and
Thank
I'll
you.
be signing up myself. I didn't know it was out there.